Hi there everyone, welcome to another Poetry Book Society online book club on Instagram. My name's Andrew McMillan, this is Patricia the Pug, and that's why you're all here really, I know. So thank you very much for, again, coming along. We're going to be chatting about this brilliant book, How to Wash a Heart by Bhanu Kapil. This evening, and Bhanu's going to be joining us later on, which I'm really excited about, to kind of read us a little bit of the work and for us to have a chat, and again for you guys to ask any questions that you might have. In the bottom I've got my glasses on again so I can see what's happening at the bottom of the screen, so hopefully it'll all go really well. I've decided to sit in a different part of the study so I can show you some more objets from around the room. This of course is the great Robin, a birthday present from my friends a few years ago, so she's kind of looking over us. Tonight, what other random objects can I show you from the shelves? We've got this, which is a little page from my favourite novel called The Man Who Fell in Love with the Moon by Tom Spanbauer, and I got so excited when I first met him that I ripped out the front of the book and got him to sign it, and then I framed it, because that's just the sort of thing that I do. What else have we got? We've got this fantastic fan that just says "Keep cool and be gay," which my sister found for me in a kind of thrift store. So all these kind of different exciting things. And so as those of you that have been watching every single one of these will be used to, but for those of you that are joining us for the first time, I'll kind of talk you through what's going to happen. I'm going to sort of introduce a bit about how we make these selections for the Poetry Book Society, how we choose the choice, the 4 recommendations and the special commendation, alongside the people that choose the translation and the pamphlet choice as well. And then I'm going to talk a bit about Bhanu's just extraordinary book, How to Wash a Heart, the first full-length collection of hers that's published in this country, although of course a fantastic career already in America and around the world. And then I'm going to perhaps read a couple of those poems, just kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the language and why I think it's so good, why it's working so much, why it's working so well. And then, again, by the magic of technology, I invite Bhanu in, and then we're going to have a chat, and we'll see how it goes. So the first thing to say is that, of course, last time we were here, we chatted about Grace Nichols, who is a special commendation for the Poetry Book Society for Summer 2020, and we chatted about Ella Frears, and Ella joined us as well, and Ella's book has just been announced as being shortlisted for the Forward Prize for Best First Collection. And so I want to give a big shout out to Ella, to Natalie Diaz, who's on the shortlist for Best Collection for the Forward Prize, another Summer 2020 recommendation of the PBS. So well done to those two, and to the entire list as well, which includes Will Harris, who was a PBS Choice back in spring 2020 as well. And so the choice for Summer 2020 that I was lucky enough to choose with Sandeep Parmar in her kind of last stint as a selector alongside myself, we chose this book, How to Wash a Heart by Bhanu Kapil. It's published by Pavilion Press, who, for those of us that don't know, it's a relatively new press, I'd say, sort of last 4 or 5 years, that comes out of Liverpool University. So it's great to have a new independent press, I think, is a choice. It's great to have a press based in the north of England as a choice. And Pavilion have just built this astonishing list over the last few years of the likes of Mona Arshy, Martha Sprackland, another poet who's on the forward list this year, and many more, Ruby Robinson, and they had this great list where they sort of have an international poet, they might have a translation, and then a new poet who's also publishing their debut, and Darren Rees-Jones there at Pavilion has just curated a really exciting list. So if Pavilion are a new press tier up in Liverpool, then I encourage you to check out some of the other books, not least Noir Alcide's Fourth Person Singular, which is a kind of cornerstone, I think, of what's been happening in poetry over the last few years, as is this book as well. And so I just say as well, this is not a kind of intellectual comment, but I love the design of these books. I like books that kind of look the same on the shelves. I'm trying to look for where, oh, they're up there, I can't reach them. But I've got all the Pavilion books together because the spines look the same, the books look the same, they're all a slightly different colour. And I love the kind of iconography of these books as well. And actually we might kind of talk a little bit more later on about that notion of the book as object, I guess it is, or the book as kind of artifact within the kind of journey. So one of the things that we're asked to do as selectors for the Poetry Book Society is we kind of wrestle over all these books. We put them out in front of us and we choose, as I've said before, 4 recommendations. For summer 2020, we choose a special commendation that we talked about last time, that's Grace Nichols, but we also choose the choice. And the choice is the book that automatically gets sent to all PBS subscribers if you're part of that membership bracket, and it's the book that we felt speaks kind of just the, I'm avoiding saying the best book because that feels like a kind of odd thing to say. I think poetry is kind of hard to quantify like that, but we choose the choice to be the most important book, the book that I think deserves the widest readership, the book that we think deserves the most eyes on it. And as part of the Poetry Book Society, that's what happens and that's what gets sent out. I must tell you as well that if you join today or just after this chat, whenever you join the Poetry Book Society, you'll get a free copy of the Summer Bulletin where we've written about Bhanu's book, about Natalie's book, about some of the other books as well. And you'll get a £10 voucher to spend in the Poetry Book Society bookshop as well. And so you'll be able to kind of buy the book, this book that we're talking about this evening, or any of the other books as well. So do check that out on poetrybooks.co.uk. They've got that special offer on just for now. If you join as a member either now or kind of after tonight, you'll be able to get that free copy of the Summer Bulletin, and you'll get the £10 voucher to spend as well. And so it's hard to know, I think, where to start with this book. And the reason that I say that is because I think that it's a book that's much, much smarter than I am. I'm not a smart guy. This book is much, much smarter than I am, but it just dazzles me. From the moment that you begin it, it just dazzles me. And I'll just say a little bit, I think, about why. It's a book, a collection that I think has to be considered as a whole object. We sometimes think about poetry collections, any of these that I could pull off the shelves around me, we sometimes think of poetry collections as being just a kind of a collection of occasional poems. So I've managed to write 50 poems in the last 5 years, so I'll stick them in a book. And that's fine, there's kind of nothing wrong with that. That's what a lot of poetry collections are, that's what a lot of mine have been perhaps. But this feels like a book that you have to consider as a kind of whole object, and that title, or that kind of opening invocation, How to Wash a Heart, it tumbles and kind of gushes straight into the first line of poetry in the whole book, and you're then kind of compelled and carried as a reader straight through all these, and then I don't know what word perhaps I should use, because they're not kind of solid individual poems that don't speak to each other. They're perhaps scenes, maybe. You're kind of compelled as a reader through these different scenes, perhaps. But then again, that description only maybe gives half a picture. I think partly this book just pulls us relentlessly through as a reader. It's an incredibly readable book, for all its kind of intellect, for all its insights and brilliance, also incredibly readable as a book, which I think is important to say. And that perhaps as well, something that we're going to get onto later, hopefully, its connections to performance and its kind of roots in performance art as well, potentially. And yet, formally as well, just as a kind of formal intricacy of this book, it has end stops at a lot of the end of the lines, and so it has these kind of staccato, quite short phrases that run down the left-hand margin of the page, and that to me suggests or means that each line has to be considered on its own as well. So not only is there this sense that you're kind of being compelled through this book, you're kind of being pulled through page by page by page, but then actually as well, kind of almost paradoxically, but at the same time, symbiotically perhaps is a better word, you're forced to consider each line in isolation and on its own, which I just think is a really powerful thing that this book is able to do. And the reader, it means that, well, me as a reader, certainly, I'm sure for all you, if you've not read it yet, or you kind of been sat reading it in the build-up to this book club, you become immediately aware of the kind of plethora of potential meanings inherent in each phrase, and you're challenged to make your own connections as well. So one of the things I think is really important about this book is it's not a passive engagement. I don't think that it's possible to engage passively with this book. I think there's a real sense that it asks of us an active involvement, that it asks us to consider our own position both of privilege, but as a reader of poetry, asks of us a kind of engagement. And that's something that I'm really excited about in poetry as well. And so I think in this book there's that, as I said, that kind of tension of construction, that propensity of the verse that pulls us through, and that just, but then with these contracted phrases, these kind of very short little phrases, if I kind of hold it up perhaps closer, you'll be able to see what I mean, this kind of momentum but this contraction that exists in a kind of duality. And it means that, to me, I think the poems have this kind of luminous three-dimensionality, which is just so exciting, that there are rooms of possible meaning and interpretation that are built for us to kind of wander around in. So again, this kind of active engagement from us and of us as we read this book. There's this great moment early on in one of the kind of scenes or moments or poems on the page that says, "To my left is a turquoise door, and to my right a butcher's table. Above you is a heart beating in the snow." Let's read that again. "To my left is a turquoise door, and to my right a butcher's table. Above you is a heart beating in the snow." And that sense that direction becomes confused, that somehow snow is above, and again with that capitalisation of each line that occurs in that, it sometimes perhaps that, and you can't see that when I'm reading it out, but that capitalisation of each kind of line at first perhaps seems archaic, or perhaps seems slightly kind of classical in its nature, but it means that each new line has a force of new statement. So each new line states something fresh to us. And so each line is kind of both a beginning afresh, but is joined to its kind of predecessor, its previous line. And so you get this wonderful kind of tension, I think, between this desire of the line to start anew every time, but the fact that it has this past connection to the line that's come before it. And I think that's something formally which is also intrinsically engaged with a lot of the kind of content and a lot of the themes of the book as well. So again, just in that 4 lines, "To my left is a turquoise door, and to my right a butcher's table. Above you is a heart beating in the snow." And there's this multiplicity then of potential meanings, but it's not confusing, and it's not, importantly, deliberately exclusionary. These words in this book sit brilliantly, I think, really brilliantly between the intellectual and the bodily. That's where I think this book sits. If I had to kind of place it somewhere, I'd say no, it sits between the intellectual and the bodily. And in between those two kind of perhaps opposing, perhaps binary, perhaps complementary states is where this book sits. That eponymous phrase of the book returns again and again, "how to wash a heart, how to wash a heart." It's interesting that it appears on the cover, I think, as a statement rather than as a question. And so do we take from that it's instructional rather than interrogative? I think it appears as both throughout the book in interesting ways. But that phrase, "how to wash a heart, how to wash a heart, how to wash a heart," it's this beautiful kind of phrase that returns and returns and returns in the book. And of course, it's at once both a meditation on love, a kind of a metaphorical question, but also a surreal question, but also a question of faith. And again, all these kind of multiplicities, all these kind of three-dimensionality of different potential things can be held within these incredibly short, contracted spaces, which I just think is one of the really kind of dazzling accomplishments of this collection. That's right, isn't it, Patricia? Yes. Patricia woke up when I said dazzling accomplishments, because that's the code word for food. And violence is in this book. I think there's exile, there's love, and yes, just to answer Lauren's question, it will remain up hopefully for longer than 24 hours if I remember to push the right button at 8 p.m. So I promise I'll try my best for you. So how to wash a heart, that phrase returns again and again. It's kind of held up to the light, like a crystal, I think, in different ways, and it reflects that then back to us violence, it reflects back to us exile, it reflects back to us love, and a world of literature as well that kind of drip out, these different themes that drip out in answer to that opening statement or question, whatever we take it to be, how to wash our heart. At the end of the collection, and again I'm hoping that me and Bhanu will be able to talk a little bit about this when she joins us in a little while, we get an essay on the performative origins of the book, or the thinking certainly that went into the book. And I think again that's a really interesting thing that comes at the end of the book. I think some other poets and some other editors might have pushed that to be at the start. No, frame the book for us, kind of frame how you wrote it, frame the kind of experience for the reader. But what's actually really exciting about this book is that doesn't come till the end, that we're kind of thrown in straight away. The first kind of page of the book, in fact, that I'll read for us now. How to wash a heart like this. It's inky early outside and I'm wearing my knitted scarf like John Betjeman, poet of the British past. I like to go outside straight away and stand in the brisk air. Yesterday you vanished into those snowflakes like the ragged beast you are. Perhaps I can write here again. A fleeting sense of possibility. K. Keywords: hospitality, stars, jasmine, privacy. You made a space for me in your home, for my books and clothes, and I'll never forget that. When your adopted daughter, an Asian refugee, as you described her, came in with her coffee and perched on the end of my cot, I felt so happy, and less like a hoax. Showed her how to drink water from the bowls on the windowsill. And you'll see just from that kind of opening statement that I think it's the right decision to put the essay at the end. I think it's the right decision to kind of somehow try and frame the experience after the reader's already walked through it. That feels like a really important decision, and just the way that we're kind of thrown in, I think, to the book straight away. So you get that title, as I say, How to Wash a Heart, and then that opening moment like this, that kind of questioning straight away. So immediately we kind of start off in uncertainty or in an uncertain space like this, as a question rather than a statement. And in many ways, the kind of, not the conclusion, because I think it's a book that resists conclusions, but one of the things I kind of keep coming back to with this book, the more that I read it, and it is a book that one must read, I think, again and again and again, is that this is work that perhaps could only exist within this specific context. And I'm kind of fascinated by books like that end up, it could only have been a book. Or a book of poetry like this. It couldn't have really been anything else. That it's found its kind of perfect form to exist in. And you get a phrase at one point in the book that says how time migrates, but it's time THYME. So how time migrates. So you get that kind of pun or that play on that word, but something that really only works visually, maybe, on the page itself. And so we kind of presented as well with that kind of physical object, the importance of the physical object of this book, which again is something that I kind of keep coming back to, and something that perhaps we'll be able to talk to Bhanu about in a little bit when she joins us as well. That opening few moments I just think are so dazzling. Oftentimes when you're reading for the Poetry Book Society, when you're reading for anything, you have to, by its very nature, read fairly fast. You have to read quicker than you normally would if you kind of could luxuriate in a book for months, because we have kind of 50 maybe books that we have to read in a certain amount of weeks, and so we give everyone its time, we give every book its due, and we spend a lot of time with each book as we read. But you're always looking for books that just kind of grab you, that immediately kind of jump up and say, I'm worth spending time with, I'm worth kind of paying attention to. And there's just something in that first kind of 3 or 4 lines that just grabs you. Like this. So immediately you kind of start off with that presumption, with that question, and then just the quality of description in that second line. It's inky early outside. That gorgeous description of a sky and a kind of a mood of light. Inky early outside. And I'm wearing my knitted scarf, and then just this line that I just think is astonishing. Like John Betjeman, poet of the British past. And what that does so cleverly is not only kind of puts this book directly in conversation with what we might think of as like the English canon, an important, I could almost not say English canon then without kind of regurgitating slightly in my mouth for some reason. Don't read too much into that. But it puts the book immediately in conversation with what we might think of as the English canon and people like Sir John Betjeman. But then it also kind of alienates the familiar poet of the British past. And so that notion of a British past becomes a kind of singular, physical, exiled space from somewhere else, which I think is really interesting. John Betjeman, poet of the British past, so he's poet of this particular place that maybe no longer exists, or maybe we're not in anymore. And again, just these small little details that the collection is able to do and kind of bring in, I just think is quite remarkable. And then it goes on, yesterday you vanished into those snowflakes like the ragged beast you are. Perhaps I can write here again. And then there's these kind of really interesting, I think, shifts of tone of voice within those few lines as well. Already we're kind of getting these different kind of, not polyphonic, but these different kind of registers of tone and language. It's interesting. And it's interesting, we've got a comment even from Andrea as we're talking that said that she took that decision to read it in kind of sets of 8 pieces, which I think is in the sets of 8 pieces as they're kind of presented. So almost like movements, perhaps. So movements rather than scenes is perhaps another way of thinking about it, these kind of movements that the book might give us. And again, I think that's a really insightful comment, and one that we perhaps might go on to think about when Bhanu does join us in a little while. I just wanted to read us another little bit. I always feel bad reading out the work of other poets because I think it is a really bad thing to do. But I just want to give us a sense of the kind of flow and the lyricism, but just the dynamism of the language, the excitement that I feel when I read this book. On page 24, for those of us that are following at home with the hymn sheet, on the 6th day I broke a vase. You went crazy. I sat in the most English of cafes with your daughter, who followed me when I ran away. I can see the resemblance, said the waitress when she brought our steaming tea. Like 2 cats trying to catch a mouse, your daughter and I smiled, buzzing with light feelings that exploded when she left into glee. That night you refused to say a word to either of us. Is silence an axe raised above the head? It's a beautiful kind of powerful moment, but again, just this ability to, I think, contract lines and to really quite forcefully enjamb lines down that left-hand margin of the page means that you end up with a line that could run on and say, your daughter and I smiled, buzzing with light feelings that exploded when she left into glee. So the feelings that explode when she leaves into glee. But it also gives you these wonderful kind of individual phrases on each line. When she left into glee. What a brilliant line just in of itself, kind of on its own. When she left into glee. And the silence and axe raised above my head, as someone's just kind of repeated these beautiful phrases that come through. And so again, this kind of the twin ability of this book that I'm just kind of in awe of, that it can both kind of has this propulsion kind of through it, but can make us pause at the same time and go, God, when she left into glee, his silence and axe raised above the head, that it can hit on these kind of really perfect kind of turnings of language that really hit home. And I realised that I've kind of gushed about this book. I'm going to invite Bhanu in a second to join us, and I perhaps gushed about it in a not massively articulate way because I get so excited that I've kind of gone straight into some of the things that really excited me, I think formally and kind of linguistically that it's doing. But I thought it might be worth just me reading the back of the blurb of the book as well, just because I think that'll probably do a calmer job of explaining kind of what's going on than me and Patricia have managed so far. You're right to write in letters and postcards to me, by the way, to say that some of you think Patricia is a bit of a dead weight in these book groups. I tend to agree. I seem to be doing all the talking, all the reading. Patricia just asleep and a bit of eye candy. We know who's pulling their weight, but that's all right. Thank you for your letters. So on the back of the book, it says How to Wash a Heart, Capil's first full-length collection published in the UK, which seems to me extraordinary, and hopefully this is the first of many, many more, depicts the complex relations that emerge between an immigrant guest and a citizen host. And that word guest and host, those two are really important words, I think, and again, I think we'll come back to that in our discussion. Drawn from a first performance at the ICA in London in 2019, and using poetry as a mode of interrogation that is both rigorous, compassionate, surreal, comic, painful and tender by turn, Kapil begins to ask difficult and urgent questions about the limits of inclusion, hospitality and care. That did a much better job in 20 seconds than I've done in half an hour, trying to sort of wrestle my way through why I'm excited by this book, why I really like it. But what I've tried to do is just sort of enthuse, I think, about formally what it is that so excites me about this book and why we chose it as the Poetry Book Society Summer 2020 choice, and just think about some of the other books that we've kind of met along the way over the last kind of sessions of these. We've had Sean Hewitt, Tongues of Fire, we've had Ella Fraser's Shine Darling, we've still got Ranjit Hoskote's book that was a summer recommendation, Natalie Diaz's book that was a summer recommendation, all these great books, but this is the one that really kind of, its sheer dynamism and its sheer brilliance, I think, suggested to us and kind of made us make that choice of making this the Poetry Book Society choice for summer 2020. And I just, on a selfish level, am incredibly excited that I get to invite Bhanu into this conversation and that we get to kind of have a bit of a chat about this book again. If you've got questions that you want to ask, I've got my glasses on so I can sort of see down the bottom. But so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite Bhanu in, and by the magic of technology, hopefully, we'll be joined together. If not, Patricia will have to do her party trick with a unicycle, you know the one I mean, and that can be the backup, that can be plan B. So here we go, magic of technology. It's all right, we don't need you yet, P. We don't need plan B yet. We might do. It's worked perfectly all the other times. This is because Patricia's jinxed it. Patricia's gone to get the unicycle, so that's all good. So this is the poetic equivalent of turning the computer on and off again, which always works, as we know, with any situation. We could try that with 2020. We could turn 2020 off and turn it back on again. Isn't that right, Patricia? Patricia's given up on us. She's gone away now. So it's just me. And if you don't think that I can vamp for 28 more minutes, then you're wrong, because I'm trained and ready for this. So Bhanu's stepping out of the Poetic Book Club for a moment, and then she's going to step back in, and then hopefully I'll be able to... Kim, I will not sing you a song, but thank you for the suggestion. Whilst that's happening, I'm not going to sing a song, but I could read another bit of the book, just because I think it's brilliant to have these words in the air. So Bhanu's going to try on the phone, and then hopefully I'll be able to add her in. But page 19 of How to Wash a Heart, this brilliant collection. Tell me about your long journey, you said, that first day. Are your children white? I was confused by the question. Perhaps I misheard. What was it like? I said there was a river, and the poets loved to soar in its pellid current. a goat deprived of its innards, then sealed, inflated, sewn up by a cobbler in a nearby colony. When the snakes appeared for the first time, the poets sat on the bank of the river with a hand-stitched flag and sang a song called Guga. No, you said, I want to hear what happened afterwards, not before. And again, that just these kind of final moments of these kind of sections, these movements, these phrases, just destroy me every time. No, you said, I want to hear what happened afterwards, not before. And so really questioning, I think, what it is as us, as a white reader, as a white audience, might demand of certain poets, or might demand of certain kind of narratives. Fantastic. So we're going to switch to a bit of text-based stuff for now. For those people watching, I'll still be here as the eye candy, but we're just going to kind of go back into the comments. So yeah, Bhanu, I'll kind of throw it over to you, I guess, at first, just to say anything you want to say about the book, first of all. So I'll read out as you're typing as well for the people that can't see the comments. I was a rancid Punjabi teenager who could only find work at McDonald's, and then I left. Now back. There's the essay at the back of the book as well that says about it starting off as a performance at the ICA. And I just wondered if you could sort of say whether you consider this book part of that art project, whether this book's a kind of separate thing to that art project, or whether it's a kind of combination of the two things. It says collaboration with your sister, as it says in the back. And I love that phrase, a performance creates detritus. That's absolutely true. That idea of making a book from the memory of that, but also what's shed off. And I think that's a beautiful idea. And so this book isn't, we shouldn't be confused that this book is a kind of a transcript or a representation of that piece. But I love that idea that it's a book from the memory of that and what's shed off. So in that sense, a book, I guess, that's partly, as you say, the memory, but partly what got lost as well along the way. I think that's such an interesting thing. I just want to reread to you what Bhanu has said as well, because I think it's so beautiful. The last section is the place where I feel open to life inside a book and wanted to see what happens to that desire for love, touch, kinship, sexual pleasure. Such a beautiful kind of way of thinking about it. Hello!
Oh my God.
It's so good. Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm sorry about all the technical mishaps.
No, it's me. I didn't realise that Instagram was an app until 45 seconds ago.
Well, there we go.
So that happened. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
So happy to see you.
You too. This book is just extraordinary. And I'm glad you're here. Do you perhaps want to read us that section that I was just kind of reading? Because I think it'll be better kind of coming from you.
Okay, I will. I got so confused that now I've lost the book and I'm in a very limited space. Hang on. Okay, I'm sitting on it. Hang on. Just going to balance it on my... Oh! So, all right. Patricia. What page were you on?
Well, I think let's go back to page 37. Let's hear it, I think, in your voice.
Okay. All right. So firstly, I was here in 1997, 98, but I went back to the US to study to become a massage therapist. So what's happened is my esophagus and the soft tissue of my mouth has formed differently around vowels and consonants, which is to say English. So I just want to say that because sometimes during a reading I can't tell, like when you said interrogative, I sort of had a bit of a frisson, if that's how you say frisson, like I just wanted... Oh, wait, I was about to apologize for my use of the English language, which seems like just the way to begin my first ever poetry reading. But that's what's happening, if anyone is wondering. I changed. I went away and I changed, and now I'm changing back. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Patricia. So, the host's gleaming hair responds beautifully to the shampoo she has set out for us to share. What's mine is yours, she says with a sweet smile. I don't want you taking her out without asking me first, she continues, holding her daughter tight against her side. I can smell your body odor. I can smell your vagina. Are you wearing your genitals as a brooch? I imagine this is what is meant by the gift of a douche and the yellow bottle of medicated powder. I want to be split into 2 parts or 1,000 pieces. I want you to touch my cervix. I want my dress shredded and my life too, then tenderly resumed or banished. Whatever you want to do to me, do it. To this end, I invited you back. But at the door to my bedroom, the host appeared in her jammies. Listen, didn't agree to this. When what you perform at the threshold is at odds with what happens when the front door is closed, then you are burning the toast and you are letting the butter fester. Verbally, you state egalitarian ideals. Financially, you hook that brown baby up. But in private, when it's snowing or when the sun is ruddy, a speculative blob, you say no, no to the wet towel on the banister. I've had enough. The host-guest chemistry is inclusive, complex, molecular, dainty. Google it. Does the host envelop the guest, or does the guest attract diminished forms of love, like the love a parent has for a child in September and January, when the child is at its most vulnerable? Are these questions enough to violate your desire for art that comes from a foreign place? What are the limits of this welcome? After all, I don't feel anything for you. On the first night, we danced Viviane. On the second night, I roasted cumin seeds, then sprinkled them on yogurt. Without words, your daughter and I drank water from the bowls on the windowsill, a traditional form of consumption. This shit's not manageable, I wrote on the fourth night, something you underlined and questioned when you found my diary and read from it aloud. Was this the moment I became an alien form? I dreamt my grandmother was lying face down in a cave, immersed in the lightly flowing water. I dreamed my grandfather was riding a motorbike without a head. I dreamed my father was pouring me a glass of white wine in the kitchen as we waited for the yogurt to cool. I dreamed my mother was crocheting the sun into a dress of copper, blue, and yellow yarn, smiling and nodding, even as a man, unknown to my family, span my body from a rusted hook. I want to wake up in the arms of the person I love and drink coffee with them on a balcony that opens up to a forest where the moss glows green in the pouring rain. We are both poets, or one of us is. It doesn't matter to me what this person does for a living or who they are inside gender's hall. Light a candle, beloved, and lay me down on the forest floor. Am I your queen? There's a knock on the door, there's a hand on my arm, your daughter is screaming, my eyes are on fire. There's a knock on my eye, there's a hand on my fire, there's a break in the scream is mine. My scream is at hand, it knocks on the land gives way, I suck the hole. The hole has a rim, and in these last moments, I clock the look that passes between you. you and the officer from the Department of Repatriation, and understand this is your revenge.
Fine. Thanks so much. I mean, I'm just so glad you're able to kind of patch yourself in and read that for us. It's just an astonishing reading that you've just given us, and it's such a kind of an astonishing book. That one of the lines that I think keeps coming back to me the more and more that I read it. What you perform at the threshold is at odds with what happens when the front door is closed. It's such a kind of beautiful, just a beautiful phrasing, I think. And it seemed to me one of the things that's really important within this book is that kind of difference between the facade and the lived experience. So the kind of performed welcomingness perhaps of the host and the lived experience and the surveillance. And I wonder is that one of the things that's kind of going on in this book for you, do you think?
Yes. I saw Sarah Ahmed, like she had for a new book, she had a special reading and an event in Cambridge, where I am. Those are the curtains of my university housing. And she talked about the university as a space that might have a banner ruffling in the breeze. She didn't say that, but ruffling in the breeze above the threshold, the 5 or 6 marble or plastic steps. She didn't say that either. She said, welcome, welcome, welcome. And that's the outward facing diversity or inclusivity statement, like, we're going to make a space for you. It's going to go really, really well. We love you. But the minute you do cross that threshold, and I'm speaking perhaps as you know, a person in the particular body that I do have, it's the incongruence, it's the discrepancy that you feel, not immediately, but after a while, in the corridor, in the classroom. And it's the discrepancy between an anti-racist welcome and the racist experience of certain kinds of institutional experience. So hidden, I suppose, within a poetry book, is a memory of performance or detritus, and wanting to make something out of that ecologically, like out of the shit, out of the mess, out of the shreds, out of the ribbons, out of the thinking, out of who you once were and who you might become. Wait, can the thing as yet to be written produce a detritus? I don't know. Just had that new thought right now. You know, what is it? What happens to the memories of having been somewhere that you no longer are? Yeah. So that's also something, maybe it's about citizenship, but I think it's about any of the spaces that I can think of that have a boundary or a dominion of other kinds. And that might come out of, like, being a poet in the US. You're often in and out of universities in a way that feels different here. So we'll see. Sorry, Andrew, I got a bit shouty there, like, with regards to the question. And I was like, yes, I can discuss that.
I could listen to this all night. I mean, well, it's interesting because another one of the words that comes up, the kind of eye of the poem turns the corner, and in a moment they're kind of no longer surveilled. And I guess just based off what you were saying, there's something about, isn't there, the hyper visibility of the kind of body of colour, or of the female body, the kind of body that's always somehow being watched or can never be invisible within a space in which it's being hosted, rather than one in which it's kind of chosen for itself.
Yes, that's true. And for me, that denotes ethnic density. And so part of my research, I suppose, 12 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know when I began to think about this, but thinking about migration and mental health. And this is from the work of Dinesh Bogra and Kamaldeep Bui in the UK. It's so interesting to kind of read all of this stuff, but migration is not the stressor, or is not the most acute stressor. But in fact, it's, you know, when you know, move up, like move into a better neighborhood, when you're suddenly the only family who's not white in a white neighborhood, but also again, the university, or I don't know, other experiences. So yeah, there's something about the mostly white space, but also a space without affinities, I want to say. And, you know, I'm just thinking of the Bay Area of the United States and kind of intercultural, or like conversations with the disability justice community, or the ways that kinship and affinity and community happened were very important to me there. And I'll be really curious to see what it's like to, you know, be a writer here, and what it feels like to move through these spaces. But I'm very touched that you took so much time with my work. I'm really not used to a conversation about my work. I don't think I've ever had one actually properly like this. So thank you so much for hosting me and making a space literally for my book and my outfit. So my mum's the Bargamies. So.
I'm so sorry that we couldn't patch you in until a little bit later than we wanted. But I wonder, to finish us off as we approach towards 8 p.m, would you be able to just read us maybe another little bit from the book?
Yes, I will now perform bibliomancy. I will now open my book at random. Hang on. Hang on. Oh. Is silence an axe raised above the head? Question mark. That was it. That's what I opened up to. And I think you read that poem earlier. So
it's such a beautiful phrase, though. That's a great kind of one finish on. Well, just thank you very much for joining us. That How to Wash a Heart is a Poetry Book Society choice for summer 2020. So if you join as a Poetry Book Society member, you'll get the copy of this book in the post with the bulletin. If you join up at the minute, you'll get a free copy of the bulletin, and you'll get a £10 voucher to buy another book. Bhanu, this book is just extraordinary, and we're all richer for kind of having it in our lives. And I'm sorry that this conversation can't go on all night, but I know there's maybe more times in the future where we get to meet and chat. So buy this book, everyone. It's telling me we've got 30 seconds left. So is there anything you want to say in those remaining 30 seconds, Bhanu?
I love you. Please don't die.
Thank you. And the same to you, and the same to everyone watching as well. Stay well, stay safe. How to Wash a Heart, out now. Get a copy. Thank you so much, Bhanu. Stay safe.